everybody, thanks for joining me. I want to show you a really easy way to make a Swiss meringue buttercream. This is hands down my favorite icing to use on cakes, a number of other projects as well, but it's really just delicious. What I'm going to start with, I went ahead and started boiling some water over here on the stove. It's just going to be a double boiler. It's about an inch thick, an inch deep of water here, and I want to bring this to a boil before I combine anything in my bowl. So what I've got here is 10 egg whites, and I'm saving my yolks for other projects. And then I've got 2½ cups of granulated sugar, and I'm just going to pour that in there. And I don't like to use double utensils. Somebody might want to use a hand whisk with like a handle. I'm just going to use the same whisk that's going to go on my stand mixer. So obviously I'm using the bowl to my stand mixer here, and I'm just going to put that on top of my pot of water so it can act as a double boiler. That way I'm kind of saving myself from doing extra dishes. So I'm just going to do this to combine this, and then I'm going to turn this down just to a low simmer. I don't need a rolling boil. I don't want to endanger myself with getting a steam burn. So I'm going to go ahead and set this on here, and I'm just going to kind of casually whisk it as we're talking. Basically what I want to do in this stage is make sure that the egg whites don't cook on the bottom of the bowl. I'm looking to dissolve the sugar crystals, and the temperature where that's going to happen is about 155 degrees. So make sure you're using a thermometer at home. If you don't have one, you can certainly test it as you go with your fingertip and just taste if there's any granules left in there. So I'm just going to keep moving this. Again, I want to make sure those egg whites don't cook on the side of the bowl. And I'm just going to keep moving it until it reaches 155 degrees. Okay, as we're approaching 155 degrees, you can tell that it's starting to turn a little bit more white than it was yellow, and you can see that a little bit more foam is happening here. And that's going to designate to you that it's kind of reaching that marshmallow fluff stage, and that's kind of what we're looking for. I suggest the first couple times you make this, don't try to rely on your eye to determine when it's ready. Really use that thermometer, because you don't want to risk your finished product having those granules of sugar in it. So I'm ready to go here, and I'm just going to take it over to my stand mixer. And I'm going to use the whisk attachment again. Make sure that's secure so that you don't fling this hot liquid on you. So definitely start it on the lowest temperature of 1, because it is hot. You don't want this to accidentally get on your skin. So you're just going to turn it up 1 notch at a time until you're kind of at a medium-high speed on your mixer. And this we're just going to let spin for, it's probably going to take like 7 to 10 minutes. We're basically dropping down in temperature from 155 degrees down to closer to 90. And at that point, we'll be able to add our butter. So we're about halfway to where we need to be. I'm going to go ahead and add my 1 teaspoon of salt in here. The reason I want to do it now rather than at the beginning, the egg whites can kind of get a little bit tough if you add the salt to them while they're still kind of raw. Adding the salt while there's still a little bit of heat in here kind of helps that salt break down a little bit. So this is a good point to add your salt. We're going to keep continuing to whip here until it gets down to about 90-95 degrees. Here it's really starting to build volume. You can tell it's starting to look like a little bit of marshmallow fluff, but just by feeling it I can tell that it's still a little bit too warm that it would melt the butter right away. So we're going to wait a little bit longer, let this develop a little bit more. Okay, now this is the point that we're so close to being ready to add the butter, but I just wanted to stop and point out here that 9 times out of 10, if somebody makes a mistake with this recipe, it's right here. They're just sick of it whipping, they're ready to add the butter and move on. And what's going to happen is it's going to deflate and it's just going to kind of stay liquid. So you really want to make sure that you let this drop down to like 90 to 95 degrees so you're really not melting that butter too much. You'll see, I'm going to start adding the butter here in just a couple minutes. I'm going to let this whip like another minute or 2. But you'll see when I do start adding the first of the butter that it's going to deflate right away. And that's okay. I'm just going to add the butter slowly, 1 cube at a time. What I've got here is 1.5 cups of salted butter. That's 6 sticks. But I let that soften to room temperature. And I really like to use real butter. People sometimes ask me, oh, can I substitute margarine? But really, I mean, there's a couple reasons you don't want to use margarine. The first thing is taste. I mean, butter is just so much better than margarine. Margarine is actually, you know, the things we've discovered, it's just really unhealthy for you right now too. just because of the molecules. It's kind of close to plastic, but the butter, just your body digests it much better. And people sometimes freak out about how much butter and sugar are going into this recipe. But the thing is, you've got to realize that the amount of butter in one serving of cake is really minimal. And if you kind of look at it, the amount of fat in that versus like your whole lunch, it's really just minimal. So don't worry too much about how much butter is going into it. Remember, it's being spread out over a lot of servings. So again, I'm going to let this whip another minute or two, get dropped down to 90, 95 degrees, and then we're going to start adding the butter. Okay, so I went ahead and cubed all my butter, and I'm just going to start adding this basically a cube at a time. And you'll see I'll add 2 or 3 cubes in here, that it's going to kind of deflate right away. And you'll see me turning the speed up and down just to incorporate this. It's okay that it deflates. Once I've got everything added in, I'm going to let it whip another couple minutes, and that volume will come back up. Don't rush putting all of your butter in. It really needs to go in just a little bit at a time. So I'm working on adding my last stick of butter in here, and you can see that there's a definite drop in volume, that it kind of looks liquid. And if I get a comment from somebody or a question, it's really at this stage here, they're like, oh my gosh, what happened? I messed something up. But the thing is, we're going to incorporate all of this butter, and then once that's done, we're going to let it continue to whip for a couple of minutes, and that's where that volume is going to come back up, and the consistency that we're looking for is really going to be there. Just have a little patience. You know, one of my tips is don't add the butter too fast. Add a couple of cubes, let it incorporate. Add a few more cubes, let it incorporate. Because if you're just kind of bombarding it with all the butter at once, then it doesn't have time to really connect inside itself and become what it needs to be. Just a little patience. So I'm just going to stop here real quick. We're not there yet. It is starting to build a little more volume, but I'm just going to stop here and scrape down the sides. And then that way I'm making sure to incorporate all of this good egg white and sugar mixture and make sure that my icing is nice and homogeneous. And then as it finishes whipping, all of that will be nice and uniform. Whipping several minutes, my volume's almost built back. I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 teaspoons of pure vanilla extract now, just so that it incorporates well while it's still a little bit soft. And then I'm going to let it finish mixing up. So after that last several minutes of whipping, you can see that it's lost that liquid type look to it, and it's really gained its volume back. So again, just have a little bit of patience with that, and it's going to come to a nice spreadable icing consistency. This, when you put it in the middle of a cake or on the outside of a cake and then you refrigerate it, it becomes nice and solid, so you can actually manipulate it a little bit to do what you want with it. This freezes really well, so if you want to make a batch and put it inside a plastic container and put plastic film right on the top of the icing and then cover the whole thing, it will freeze really well. All you'll want to do is pull it out like the night before you want to use it and set it on the counter to thaw. And then you can whip it up in your mixer again right before you use it, and it's going to have a great spreadable consistency. That's a great time saver. But this is one of my very favorite icings. I think it just has a few ingredients, just use quality ingredients, and it's going to have a really fabulous taste, and I think you're really going to enjoy working with it. Thanks for watching.